If you're on the call today, you probably work on community development in some way, whether as a local elected or appointed official, a developer, a nonprofit community development corporation, or otherwise. No matter how you approach housing development, this tool can help you, and we're excited to tell you how today. So before we get too far along, I wanted to sort of allow folks that are on the call to introduce themselves. I'm Drew Williams-Clark at the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning.
Nancy Fraser from the Metropolitan Planning Council.
Mayor Christy Kavark, Mayor of Village of Gurnee.
Allison Clements with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus.
And Brianne Gala from the Metropolitan Planning Council.
So just wanted to give you all an idea of who is with us. We also just want to iron out a couple of logistical concerns before we get started. One, to be clear, you can hear the presenters, but we can't hear you. We do want to be able to answer your questions, but please use the GoToWebinar interface to submit questions through the chat box. And please make sure that they are directed to organizers and panelists. I want to be clear, you need to make sure that you're addressing your chat to both organizers and panelists. We will select a number of questions to address at the end of the webinar, depending on the time available and the ones that we can make sure address the broadest range of concerns. Just briefly, as we get started, our agenda for the webinar is, one, to provide you a background on the Homes for a Changing Region project, answer some questions about why we think you should be using these tools, answer the question of what is the Homes for a Changing Region process, and give you some ideas for how you can use these tools. And then finally, in the end, we will do our best to make sure that there are at least 15 minutes to answer your questions. So now that we've completed introductions, we want to give you a little bit of a background. And our first thing that we sort of want to impress upon everyone, and we'll probably repeat this again, is that we believe the Homes for a Changing Region Toolkit can tell you who lives in your community, what kind of housing they need, and how to bring the right kind of housing to your community through policy.
This is Nancy Fraser, and as a former mayor, I understand the importance of planning. During my tenure as mayor of Glenview, I oversaw the redevelopment of the Glenview Naval Air Station, now known as the Glens. We had acquired over 1,100 acres of land, and as part of the planning process, needed to know the type of housing that would be in demand in our community going forward. It is this type of thinking that started the Homes for a Changing Region project back in 2005. The goal was to use demographic forecasts to plan for the region's future housing needs. In other words, it called for a proactive approach to housing solutions rather than a reactive one. The Homes Project helps municipalities understand who is living in their community today and the type of housing needed for their residents going forward. I like to say that it allows you to plan for people, not buildings. Since the project's inception, and by the end of this year, we will have developed over 40 housing policy plans for municipalities across our region. And as we approach the 10-year mark in the project team decided that we needed to build the capacity of other stakeholders, municipalities, consultants, nonprofits, to conduct this type of analysis on their own. So before we launch into the substance of our training today, we thought it would be helpful for everyone to hear from a mayor who has participated in the Homes Project. Mayor Christina Kavark of Gurnee participated in the project in 2008, and she will talk about the benefits it provided to her community. Christine?
Thank you very much, Nancy, and thank you for inviting me to talk about Homes for a Changing Region. I'm probably one of your biggest cheerleaders because this has been an absolutely amazing tool for our community. The biggest benefit of the Homes for a Changing Region project is that it gives you the ability to make an informed decision about the type of development that your community needs in the future. When developers come to you with a proposal, you can confidently say yes or no based on the analysis from this project. This is critical because, as we all know, as communities, we don't get a second chance when it comes to making these types of decisions. The Homes for a Changing Region study showed us here in Gurnee that a large portion of our population was aging and that much of our elderly population is low to moderate income. We realized that we didn't have any housing options for this segment of the population, and that if we didn't do something about it, many of our long-term residents would need to leave town. So since this realization, Gurney has already seen progress in improving its senior housing stock. Using our homes report as proof of the need, we pushed for new development. One example is or several examples, Thomas Place, an affordable and accessible 100-unit senior housing complex, was completed in May 2012 and is so popular that it has a waiting list of interested tenants. We also sought out and had developed Heritage Woods, which is 105 units of assisted supportive living housing. We are also working on other projects for seniors with various types of disabilities. The Homes Project also helped us to realize that we already had plenty of large lot housing and that our demographics were showing us a preference for smaller, more compact housing in the future. The Homes Report has enabled us as a community to very confidently say no to housing development that is not in our best interest. I highly recommend that you take advantage of this wonderful tool that's been developed for you. Thank you.
And thank you, Mayor Kovarik. We couldn't have done this presentation so effectively without you.
Okay.
So as we move forward, we want to address a few questions with the remainder of the presentation. Once again, this is Drew Williams-Clark from CMAP, and I'm going to be talking most of the way through this webinar, so I hope you don't get sick of hearing me. First thing we want to talk about is why you should use these tools. We really think these tools are about answering your questions, and we know you have them. Some of the biggest questions that these tools can help you answer are, who lives in the community that I serve? Are they spending too much money on housing? What is my community's capacity to accommodate future residents? And does this development proposal make sense for my community, as Mayor Kovarik just mentioned? We've got answers. The tools that we've put online will allow you to generate demographic profiles quickly and easily, create graphs comparing supply and demand by resident income levels, identify the kinds of housing development current policies allow, and if you'd so desire, to create a full plan to meet demand now and in the future. Before we get started, I want to provide sort of a quick soundbite to describe what Homes for a Changing Region is. Homes for a Changing Region is a planning process that has been used to help municipalities adopt long-range plans to meet housing demand through policy. These tools can also help planners and developers better understand local housing markets, engage residents, and review existing local policies. So a couple of things that I just want to dig a little bit deeper into on this slide. One is that we want to make sure that everyone understands that while we will discuss a process, the tools that we've provided you online can be used separately to do a variety of different things. We also just want to make sure that you understand that while we will be addressing most of the comments in this webinar to municipalities, we think that they're broadly applicable to planners and developers in different contexts. So I want to start by talking through the Homes process as we've typically used it. And there are basically four broad components from beginning to end of the Homes for a Changing Region planning process. The first is initiating the project. The second is analysis. The third is outreach. And ultimately, every plan should end with policy recommendations to help address challenges and meet the vision that's been identified by residents and stakeholders. So a typical process will last from about 15 months, beginning with the project initiation and ending, ideally, with the formal adoption of a plan. I'm going to cover each of these steps individually, but in broad strokes, each of the components is to begin with key questions to consider, hold an initial discussion with community leaders, use the data analysis tool to understand current conditions, use the outreach tools to understand the vision of stakeholders and residents, and use Homegrown to explore remedies to challenges and strategies to achieve the vision. As I mentioned, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into each of these components. So to begin with project initiation, there are a variety of questions that you should consider before approaching a Homes for a Changing Region project. I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these, but very briefly. So the first thing to consider is, how do you intend to use the report? Do you hope that it will be a study to help inform your review of upcoming development proposals. Do you hope that it will be a guiding policy document that needs to be formally adopted through resolution? It's really important to start to think about that at the very beginning of the process, because the answer to that question can largely dictate how you will plan the process from beginning to end. The second is not a small question, which is who will lead the project. And typically, this could be either a municipal staff member or it could be a consultant. And so that leads us to the next question. What resources do you have available? So obviously, these could be both, they could be monetary, they could be staff, or they could be external resources. If you have the funding to allow you to hire a consultant, obviously that can be very helpful. If you have staff capacity to do the project on your own, we think that that is a great option to explore, and that's why we produced the toolkit. If you have external options that you can draw, resources that you can draw from, we certainly would encourage you to do that. And those could be the folks that are on the call right now, or they could be independent nonprofit organizations that might be able to support you through this journey. The next question is, how can I engage elected officials as champions? And we really think this is an important question for you to consider. This could be the mayor, hopefully. It could also be a series of elected trustees or city council people. But we think it's very important to identify who can be your champions from day one. And the last question is, should my municipality pursue this project in collaboration with neighboring communities? We're not going to focus too much on that option during this call, but there's text and support in all of the tools to help you consider whether or not it would be in your best interest to collaborate with neighboring communities in order to have what we call a sub-regional Homes for a Changing Regions plan. So the next step in the process is analysis. And this is so important that we think that there will be 2 slides to describe it. The first one, and we think this is so important that we wanted to describe it in some detail on 1 slide. So the first step is to hold an initial discussion with community leaders. There are a few points here to sort of go through. One is that this should be an open discussion of strengths and challenges. Elected officials, senior staff members, and maybe even key external stakeholders all will have their own ideas of the strengths of every community and its challenges as well. We think it's very, very important to engage elected officials at this first meeting. So that, again, could be a mayor, it could be a trustee, or it could be a council member, but it's someone that you want to have involved and will know all of the steps of the process and be involved in them from the beginning to the end. We want to make sure that you identify important stakeholders to consult throughout the process, and this is the meeting to do that. The project team here, and when I talk about that, I'm talking about the project manager and any staff or consultants that will be doing most of the work on the project, should really be in a listening role at this meeting. Should not be driving the discussion, should avoid over-reliance on data. This meeting is about listening to the wisdom of the community's senior staff and elected officials. And then it's important at this meeting also to identify key places that your study might be able to focus on. And in our experience, a tour obviously only is necessary when an outside consultant or an outside group is involved. But if you do have such a group involved, then it's important to give them, probably at this stage, a tour of the entire community. The next thing that we think you should do is use the data analysis tool, and we'll actually demonstrate that tool in a minute. But the questions that this tool can help you answer are, how many rent versus own? How many single-family, townhome, and multifamily units are available in your community? How many may be living beyond their means? Is supply keeping up with demand? How do we compare with the rest of the region? And then, will our policies accommodate the growth that's been forecasted by CMAP within our community? The next step is outreach, and we would encourage you to use the outreach tools that we've made available online to understand the vision of stakeholders and residents. You should be thinking about the current planning and policy context, and by that I mean if you're already doing a comprehensive plan, for example, and you're doing outreach around that, it may be a good idea to piggyback your outreach for the homes project on a bigger, sort of more comprehensive planning effort. If you've already done a series of other plans, your residents and stakeholders might be experiencing what we call planning fatigue. And so if that's the case, then that's a very important consideration before you decide how to go forward with outreach. We want to make sure that you seek both proactive input and reactive feedback. It's not enough just to distribute drafts and say, what do you think? We think it's very important to creatively engage residents and stakeholders somewhere in the middle of the process. We want to make sure that you're informing stakeholders about what the data and trends are telling you about the community. We want to make sure that you're considering critically how to engage underrepresented groups. And then there are a couple of more technical considerations that you should, discuss. So the two big ones are you going to use in-person or web-based or a combination of the both in terms of tactics when you engage residents and stakeholders? And so we will talk about tools on both ends of those. But some things that we've come to notice are if you're going to rely on a series of public workshops or maybe even one public workshop, you will really need to try to target a certain critical mass of attendees. And everyone on the call right now who's a planner is groaning because we all have experience with how difficult it can be to get sort of that critical mass, which is probably around 20 to 40 folks in a public meeting. And if you don't have the capacity to be able to get that level of in-person engagement, then we think it's a good idea to consider web-based engagement. And we'll talk about some of those tools in a minute. The other thing I would consider is your demographics and who is likely to be able to engage via the web and who will likely be able to engage in person. And then the last thing, two techniques that we think are really important to use are a mapping exercise that allows people to look at their community as a whole and comment about things like where preservation is needed, where reinvestment is needed, and where future development or redevelopment might make sense. And then finally, we really think it's important to use what's called a visual preference survey. I'll show you exactly what that looks like in a minute, but basically it allows residents to look at pictures of different kinds of housing and give their reactions to whether or not they think that that's appropriate for development within their community. The last step is policy, and ultimately at this point you should have engaged residents and data analysis to identify challenges and a vision for housing in the community down the road. And so we think it's a good idea at this point to explore what might be some remedies to these challenges and strategies to achieve that vision. We've used Homegrown, where we've updated a tool called Homegrown to provide you with access to a library of case studies that document these strategies where they've been used by communities in the Chicago region. These fall into 4 categories: policy, development, program, and finance. And I will show you that website in a second. But ultimately, you'll also want to determine if you'll need additional support at this point. We find oftentimes, especially that municipal staff will want to shy away from being the face of policy change that may be sensitive. And so this is a good point at which to consider that and what resources you have available. So the next part of the webinar is going to be showing you exactly how to use these tools. So the first in our series of tools is going to be the data analysis guides and models. And you'll notice that there are 2 of them. One of them focuses specifically on the CMAP region, which is the 7 counties of northeastern Illinois. And the second focuses on the entire state of Illinois. So I want to show you how to use both of those. And this is the first time that I will be using a link directly to the toolkit. I've given you a short link on the slide here, which is http://cmap.is/homes-toolkit. I know that doesn't look like a normal link, but I promise you it will work. So what I'm going to do now is show you what it looks like when you click that link. Hopefully everyone now is looking at the landing page or the full Homes for a Changing Region toolkit. So as you can see, most of this text, until you scroll down, is basically description of the project. But what we want to focus on as you scroll down for the purposes of this webinar is a summary of the content. So what we've just described is given in much, much more detail under this process guide that I'm pointing to now. So we would certainly encourage you to download that. There's also an example project scope, an example project timeline, and example recommendations memo. Recommendations memos are a tool that we've used in order to make elected councils more familiar with some of the recommendations that we intend to pursue before we commit to drafting a full plan. So to get back to the data analysis guide and model, you'll see here that there are 4 links. The bold links are to PDF guides that will help you use the model, and then the 2 links are to 2 Excel files in a zipped format that will allow you to look at either the CMAP region model or the Illinois model. So I'm briefly going to look at both of these. First, I'm going to look at the model for the CMAP region. So I hope that the text is big enough. I've tried to zoom into it. But if you download this tool, then you will be able to very, very quickly get a profile of the community that you're studying within the CMAP region. So what you want to do is click Select Geography and Load Data. From that, you'll get a window that pops up. So the first thing I'm going to do is click List Munis. Sorry for folks on the phone that represent our municipalities, but that's our shorthand for municipalities. Then what I'm going to do is select the municipality that I'm interested in by scrolling down. So just for fun, and since we had the mayor of Gurnee on the phone, I'm going to go ahead and select Gurnee. And then I'm going to click Load Data for Selected. So great. Now I've done that, and instantaneously I've been able to load all kinds of information into this spreadsheet about Gurnee. So on the first tab, you'll see some initial inputs, which include population, vacancy rate, vacant units, the number of households in the community, the persons in group quarters, and then a couple of median income statistics, both for the owner-occupied households and renter-occupied households. The next graph gives us a 10-year breakout of owners versus renters by age group. So we're looking at householders here. The next tab gives us a breakout of unit type by renter versus owner. So you can see both both occupied housing units across these different types of housing. You can see if they are rent versus own in each of these categories, and you can compare them to the breakouts within the CMAP region at large. And then you can get a little bit more detail as to the breakout across multifamily, whether you're talking about 2-unit buildings or all the way up to very large buildings of 50 units or more. The next slide talks about cost burden. And when we do Homes for a Changing Region, I think it's really important to understand that when we look at affordability, we're really looking at the ability of existing residents to live in units that they can afford at 50% or less of their household income. If the unit is affordable, we think that it's a unit that a household can afford paying less than 30% of their income. What you're looking at here is a comparison of Gurnee to the CMAP region by renter versus owner in the 2 different graphs, and how cost burden has changed in both of these groups between 2000 and 2012. This is fairly typical throughout the CMAP region. As we know, the recession hit a lot of folks hard, and a lot of that's been taken out on housing cost burden. The next thing the slide will show you, the next tab that the Excel will show you, is a breakout of owners and renters, both within Gurnee as compared to the CMAP region. And I want to show you very quickly that the x-axis here, or the bottom row, will show you each of the the income buckets that we will typically use in our studies, which range from households earning less than $15,000 a year all the way up to households earning more than $150,000 a year. The next thing is what we really tend to focus on in terms of supply versus demand. And I really want to make sure that everyone understands this because we'll have a tab on both rental and owner units and households. So what we're looking at here is a graph that shows, again, these different income buckets all the way from less than $15,000 a year to more than $150,000 a year, and shows you in blue the actual households that are at that income, and in red the units that are affordable at that income level. And so as we can see here, for renters in Gurnee, there's a great supply in the middle range. And there's sort of an undersupply at the low and the high income ranges. And this is fairly typical. And so part of what we want to encourage people to do, and what our sort of message here is that everyone should be sort of thinking about housing stock diversity, but it really should be about meeting current demand for housing that is attainable for folks that are at each of these income levels. The next graph that I'm going to show you is the exact same thing, but looking at rental supply. And you'll notice that there are two colors on the right here, and that shows us stock that is affordable to folks with and without mortgages. And the punchline here is that oftentimes we see an undersupply at the low-income level, but often what we see as any supply is accounted for by folks that don't have mortgages, which typically will be senior citizens who've already paid off their mortgages. And so this is a fairly typical housing profile of a municipality in the CMAP region. And as you've already heard, the mayor and her staff are working and have addressed the issues that they've identified through the course of their homes project. So I want to click back to the slide briefly and transition to the Illinois, or the remainder, the out-of-region analysis tool. And I'm going to show you now how that works. So the first thing that you'll notice is that there isn't an automation. But I want to let you know that the ability to enter the information and output the types of charts and graphs that you've seen already is very, very easy, even without that level of automation. So I'm going to look at current age data, and I want to draw your attention to the way that this looks. So if you'll notice, there are a series of purple cells. Those are cells that you will want to enter data. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, I don't know how to get this data. I'm going to show you. It's very, very easy. What you're looking at here in this cell where it says ACS is the table number of the American Community Survey that will directly pull this information. So what I'm going to do is copy that table, and then I'm going to go to the American Community Survey website, which I have, of course, conveniently already pulled up. I'm going to take that tab and drag it over here so you can see it. Here is the American Community Survey American Fact Finder tool. And you remember that I just copied that tool table number. I'm going to paste it here, and then I'm going to start typing Gurnee. And as you can see, I only have to get to Gurn before the tool understands that I'm looking for the village of Gurnee in the state of Illinois. Then I'm just going to click Go. And great, so what I found here is exactly the table that I'm looking for. So I'm just going to go ahead and click the 2013 American Community Survey 3-year estimates, although typically we'd ask you to look at the 5-year estimates. Actually, I'll click on the 5-year estimates. So I'm clicking on that table, and here you'll see that I found the data that I'm looking for. From here, it's as simple as copying and pasting this table directly into the purple cells that we just saw. So just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and do that for you. So I will actually dump these into this set of cells to make it a little bit easier. Copy and paste the estimate data, paste it as a value, and as you can see, the chart is already populated. Done. You can go through the remainder of these tabs with very, very similar ease, and you will be able to populate the data analysis tool for yourself. So I'm going to stop talking about the tool for now and get rid of a couple of these windows. I apologize. And head right back to the PowerPoint that will get us to where we are going next. My apologies. The next tool set that we want you to look at is around outreach and our outreach guide and materials. And again, I want to reiterate that these tools can be used for any planning process. They don't have to be used in this order. We're not prescribing any one tool over another. In fact, we want to encourage you, if you know of outreach strategies and techniques that work in your community, you should use those. So I want to then dig a little bit deeper into the outreach tools that we've developed for the toolkit. So I'm going to go directly to the outreach webpage that we've developed for the toolkit, which is at the link that you see on your screen right now. So it's http://cmap.is/homesoutreach. So I'm going to go right to that webpage. And again, you'll see there's a lot of landing page text. I'm going to scroll past that text and get right to the summary of the content that we'll look at right now. So first, there's a guide, and everything that we'll talk about now is described in more detail in that guide. So I would definitely encourage you to read it. Some of the more exciting things for us to look at, though, while we're doing a webinar, are each of the artifacts that we think can help you engage your community residents and stakeholders in providing input into this process. I'm just going to talk about those briefly, each one of them. First, we have an example of a community outreach website, so I'll click that very briefly. We have used MetroQuest as a vendor to create these websites, and we understand that everyone may not have these resources. If you look at the guide, you will see a series of free web tools that you can use to do many similar things on the web. But this tool essentially allows us to do both the visual preference survey that I described earlier, and I'll dig into a little bit more detail, and the mapping exercise that we talked about briefly earlier as well. So we definitely want you to consider the idea of using web tools. So I'm going to click back to the outreach page, and we'll look at the next artifacts. I'm actually not going to click on this one because it's not very interesting, but we have provided you with a series of emails that you can use to help educate all of your interested residents and stakeholders about concepts of housing supply and demand, national trends, what, again, we mean by affordability in terms of housing cost burden. I help them to understand some of the upcoming elements of the homes process. All of that is provided for you in boilerplate if you download the example emails here. The next is a community workshop guide, which describes the process for a facilitator in order to conduct a workshop from beginning to end the way that we've done it. All of the mapping exercise materials in terms of graphics, facilitator guides, everything that you could possibly need in order to conduct your own public workshop, the way that I've described it so far, is downloadable at this link. I want to show you briefly what a visual preference survey is because I think it's so important. So I'm going to do that very briefly. Sorry for the delay. Again, sorry for the delay. But this is a PowerPoint that you will download when you click the link that I just showed you. What you're looking at right now is a picture of a house, obviously. And then if you look at the next slide, this is the question that you might ask of a group of people who are attending a public workshop. And it asks for their reaction to this type of a unit. And they can respond in one of three ways. I'd like to see this in my neighborhood, not in my neighborhood, but somewhere else. Or three, it wouldn't fit anywhere in the village or the city. You can see these percentages on the left and then a countdown timer on the lower right-hand corner. This is because typically when we do these visual preference surveys in person, we do them using keypad polling equipment. And CMAP actually makes that keypad polling equipment available to anyone who wants to borrow it within the 7-county region of Chicago. And I'll show you a link that you can use to contact the CMAP staff member that can arrange for you to borrow that equipment. But we want you to be able to download this PowerPoint so you can see a template of what a visual preference survey might look like. I'm going to go, again, back to the website very briefly. Sorry. This is the outreach website. The other thing that we've done is made photos of various housing types available to you through public domain using Creative Commons licensing using a Flickr account. So if you click the link that I just showed you, you will get to a Flickr account that is searchable and tagged using such text as single-family detached, large lot, small lot, multifamily, mixed use, transit-oriented development, retail, etc. Personally, as a planner, I've been looking for this kind of a photo library for years. It's not easy to find, and you're always concerned that you're inappropriately borrowing intellectual property if you use other folks' photos from online. And so we think that this is a great tool. There are actually more than 1,000 photos of housing types that we've photographed across the CMAP region that you can use for non-commercial purposes anytime you like. And so we just want to make sure that you're aware that this resource is available to you. So I'm going to go back to the main outreach website. And again, we're looking at the materials that you can use. The final thing that you can see here is that you can download an example outreach summary memo. And the summary memo is really another device that we use in order to condense and communicate the results of all the outreach endeavors that we've done over the course of a homes project and present that information to a governing board or a city council. And so it's really important for folks to be able to condense that and be able to communicate it to folks in one concise document. So if you were to look at that, you'd see how we've framed those in the past. And just as a teaser, we think the VPS, the Visual Preference Survey, allows people to do that allows people to come up with information that may show that the perception of what existing residents are interested in seeing in their community may not actually be accurate. And so if there's, for example, a perception that folks are only interested in seeing large lot single-family detached housing, oftentimes we find that a visual preference survey can show that indeed people are interested in additional diversity of housing stock, and this allows you to sort of, the outreach summary memo allows you to communicate that very effectively, again, to a elected board. So the last component of the toolkit that I want to be able to show everybody is what we call Homegrown. And there's a short link to get to Homegrown right on the slide right there, http://cmap.is/homegrown2. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. But I want to again emphasize that Homegrown is not going to do all of the work necessary to lead you from challenges identified to potential policy solutions to developing ordinance language to presenting that to an elected board to actually implementing that program or policy. So I wanted to see. I think we're having a little bit. Sorry for the feedback. But we want to make sure that people understand that we want to make sure that folks understand that tool is really just to allow you to explore some case studies for what has worked in the Chicago region. So without further ado, I want to show you what that looks like online. So I'm going to click over from the main Toolkit website to Homegrown, and then I'll actually make this a little bit bigger so folks can see it. Oh, okay, good. That's pretty good. There are 4 categories of case studies that we've collected. The first is around policy and governance. The second is around case studies of housing developments that have worked really, really well and people are very proud of. The third is programs, and the final is finance. So just to give you a scenario of how we think you might be able to use this tool, recently we completed a Homes for Changing Region plan for 4 communities in Kane County, Batavia, Geneva, North Aurora, and St. Charles. And as we looked at the analysis and the stakeholder outreach that we had done, we began to think that the conditions in this area were very similar to conditions in the Lake County area in which Highland Park first decided to explore the strategy of using a community land trust as a way to develop more housing stock diversity, develop additional affordable units that are governed and sort of controlled by local residents and stakeholders. So I'm going to click on this first link, which is Community Partners for Affordable Housing, and show you how we were able to dig deeper into what that policy might look like as it exists now and how we might be able to adapt that to the conditions in Batavia, Geneva, North Aurora, and St. Charles. And so as you can see, as I click this link, I get a very easy to understand 2-sentence description of what the strategy is. I see the background of how that strategy was adopted and developed. I can see its goal, the target population and challenge that it was intended to address. I see how the financing of the land trust was done. I I see it's successful in that it's developed 60 units since 2003. We get a little bit of information on lessons learned. Then we see some more information on how a community land trust actually works. We see, again, some more detail on financing. And then finally, and I think this is really possibly the most important part here, there is updated contact information for each one of these case studies so that if you want more information on a community land trust, you can call Community Partners for Affordable Housing directly, you can email them, and you can visit their website. And all of the folks that we've tapped to have their contact information up on this website know that your calls and emails are coming, and they're happy to accept them. So that completes sort of the deep dive that we're going to be giving you into the toolkit itself. And we want to sort of transition now into just sort of repeating what we're here for. And again, I want to reiterate the Homes for a Changing Region toolkit can tell you who lives in your community, what kind of housing they need, and how to bring the right kind of housing to your community through policy. So at this point, we want to transition into a question and answer session. So I'm going to turn it over to Allison Mills, who will discuss some of these questions and answers, and I'll try to address them.
Great. And Drew, I'm going to ask you to just open the questions box so I can see them.
Sure.
I think we have one question so far. Let's see.
Yeah, good question. So the question is, will this presentation be available online? Yes, we're actually recording it right now, and we will put it up on a mechanism like YouTube so that you can stream it or download it to your own computer and watch it again later.
So I think that's the only question we're seeing. We'll wait a couple more minutes to see if anyone wants to type in any other questions.
Okay, so we've got a few more questions. Is the data in the data analysis guide fixed at a certain point in time, or will they be updated, and if so, how often? No, it's not fixed. We fully intend to release updated data analysis guides and tools. We've also, and I should have shown you this on the website, but we really, really encourage folks who download the data analysis guides and tools to sign up in the window at the bottom of the web page. Give us your email so that we can make sure that when we release an update that you're aware of the update and can download it at that time. But this is not a fixed process, a fixed set of tools, and we really do intend to update them. So thanks for that question. The next question is 2010 census data not available with this tool? I noticed it is 2000. No, I do believe that we're either looking at 2000 and the 2012 rolling averages at this point in the tool. So where we use 2000 data, it's meant to provide a trend. So we're not using 2010 census data in most of the parts, and I'll give you a little bit of detail why. The 2010 census data does not provide anything more than population counts and race breakouts, and that is because the 2010 census data is used at this point, as all decennial census data is used, primarily for redistricting. All of the social data and demographic data that you're used to from the decennial census is now only available using the American Community Survey. So we can really only use 2000 data to trend, and we really only use that where the variables allow us to trend.
The next question is, how can and should the process be part of or adopted as part of a community's comprehensive plan? I think that communities have used this study in a variety of ways. Some have used it as a study, as a reference document. Others have adopted it as the housing chapter of their comprehensive plan. So I think it's really what your community wants to make of it. And I would add for all of the tools, that we've offered here. I think you can kind of pick and choose what you want based on your capacity level and your interest, but certainly we would encourage municipalities to use this as a resource for writing housing recommendations in their comprehensive plan.
Yeah, we actually think more and more that this is an option that people should explore. And one reason, and it's not set in stone, but there definitely is grounding in state legislature for the sort of the place that a municipal comprehensive plan has in terms of sort of legal authority. And so if your housing recommendations are adopted as part of your comprehensive plan, they tend to have a little bit more oomph. And so we're exploring at this time with the project team ways that this can be integrated into a comprehensive plan process. But part of what we wanted to do with the toolkit is just put all of the tools that we use out to you, and hopefully we'll hear your feedback on how they've worked best for you in a comprehensive planning context. So another thing that we want to make sure you understand is that the data tool can be used for any plan, and it just dives a little bit deeper, I think, than most of the data analysis that we would typically incorporate into a comprehensive plan. But that data tool can be helpful for lots and lots of different reasons. Also, the data tool really focuses on housing data, and I want to encourage folks to visit the CMAP website and look at our community data snapshots, which provide you with 4 or 5 pages of tables on all kinds of data about your municipality. And so just another little tidbit there.
The next question is there data for community areas within the city of Chicago? And I'm going to let Drew answer that one.
Awesome. So at this time, there is not information about the 77 Chicago community areas. And that's a great question. And it kind of pivots well into maybe the next section of the presentation. But just to tease you, as I like to do, make sure that if you have ideas like this, in other words, if you want us to add the 77 community areas, email me. We will be updating everything about this toolkit, and so we need to know what is of most value to you. And so this is actually something that's already come up, and I'm pretty sure that we will be able to do that. I'll talk more about this, but it probably won't be added for a while. And so if there is a need for this in a specific Chicago community area, email me offline, and we'll make sure that you get the information that you need.
Okay, any other questions? This is the last call for them. I think it sounds like that is it.
So we want to sort of give you a couple points. One, my email is on the screen now. Feel free to email me with any questions you have. A couple of things. If you are interested in doing this for yourself and you think that you have some more questions, or if you need any support, probably your first stop should be to email me. And we will delegate those emails to other project team members as we think makes sense. But I'm probably the one person that you should start with. We also want to make sure that you understand that you can download any of the homeless plans that we've completed at the 2 links at the bottom of this PowerPoint. And as I mentioned before, we will be putting this link on the toolkit. Sorry, we will be basically YouTubing this presentation and putting that link up on the toolkit website very, very soon. But for now, just know that you can download any of those homeless plans that we've already done at either the CMAP or the caucus website. And then just to close, I want to emphasize that we need your feedback. This is just version 1.0. We intend to release 2 versions in the next 2 years, one in 2016 and one in 2017. So email me, as I just said, with your ideas to improve the toolkit. The more emails I see saying we need the 77 community areas, the more I can tell that there's a lot of demand for that information. We really just want to make sure that we are making revisions to the toolkit or additions to the toolkit that are in demand. And so even if you think somebody's already emailed me about it, email me again so that I know how important this is. And then our next question that we want to make sure that we get your feedback on is, today I hope has been a good training, but would you be interested in more specific training? And so we have a survey that we have created that we would love for all of you to complete. And the link is here at the bottom of the slide. We know that you can't click that link, and it's kind of a long link. So tomorrow, within 24 hours, every one of you will receive a follow-up email that includes that link. And we really, really, really strongly beg, plead, encourage you to complete that survey. It'll take less than 5 minutes. We need your input to know what more information you need, what kind of support you need, how we can improve these webinars. It's really, really helpful for us to have that feedback. So we'll just pause there in case anyone is frantically typing that URL into their browser. And then lastly, and before we end the webinar, I just want to say a special thank you to the Office of the Illinois Attorney General, without whose leadership in the National Foreclosure Settlement, none of this would be possible. And so thank you so much. Again, we hope to hear from you soon. And thank you for giving us your lunch hour today. I hope that it benefited all of you.